All right, well, welcome everybody. I am Betsy Goodrich. I'm with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, and we are, in case you don't know who MVPC is, we are the Regional Planning Commission for 15 communities. We cover along the Merrimack River from here in Newburyport and Salisbury, follow the river all the way down to Andover, Methuen, and Lawrence, and some of the rural communities in between. We provide planning services to the 15 communities in a variety of ways. I happen to be in the transportation department. We also provide services in environment, land use, GIS, housing. We just did a housing production plan, economic development. So we do quite a variety of things for our member communities. What I'm talking about today is looking at transportation and climate change. I happen to be the bicycle, pedestrian, and transit planner for the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. And one of the things we look at is for Massachusetts, our big goal is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And we all know that's such a big deal here in Newburyport and in the coastal communities because you are faced with some of the sea level changes and the sea level rise. It's a big deal around here. And
Betsy Goodrich, transportation
and so when we think about transportation, you know, nationwide, you can see here on the right, transportation takes up about 29%, or is to blame for 29% of the greenhouse gas emissions. But here in Massachusetts, it's 43% of greenhouse gas emissions. And that's a huge deal. So that falls on us. How do we change that so that we aren't contributing all the problems to the increase in greenhouse gas emissions and the problems that go along with it? How can we reduce our impact? Well, let's look at that. Why is that? Well, at the very top, 76% of the people in the Merrimack Valley drive alone. And this is from the census. And you can see 52% of the people in the Merrimack Valley work in the Merrimack Valley. So they're not traveling that far necessarily, although if you travel from one end of the Merrimack Valley to the other, it's a bit of a distance. But you can also see that not very many people are using public transit or walking, or bicycling was even less than that. I didn't even put it up there. It's like 1% or something like that. And that's the primary mode of transportation. I think this was for commuting. So how do we make a change, you know? And I think that, you know, when you're talking about mode shift, we're talking about creating a transportation system and a network that works for people in multiple ways so that you have options, so that we make it easy for you to make that switch, so that it's efficient economically for you, it's efficient geographically for you, that it's fun, and that it's convenient. We'll make it easy for you. If you want to ride your bike, but oh my gosh, is it really hard to do, and is it uncomfortable? Are you afraid? You don't feel safe? You know, that makes it hard for people to want to do. So in the regional level, we started with, in our region, multi-use trails. So that's sort of our first layer of what we did in switching over and trying to help with the mode shift. And here in Newburyport, we had one of the early really great rail trails that was created, the Clipper City, that connects the downtown to the Commuter Rail. So now if you live in the downtown area, you can either ride your bike or walk to the trail and get directly to the Commuter Rail, and your entire trip can be without getting into a car. And that's really exciting. That's what we want. And you can see our progress is very good. So we were looking at a goal of about 40 miles with all of our rail trails in the region that people were planning. And we're at 43% are already open, and we have a bunch coming down the pipeline. So this is a general map of the region, and I've drawn on where the rail trails are right now. So this shows you that, and not all of them are rail trails, the Shawshing River Greenway is on there, and I did not draw the Merrimack Valley Trail that we also are promoting and advocating for in the region. But these are regional connections that get you from one part of the the region to the other, and even within your own community. And they're important. So, for example, Lawrence is building one, and you can then take that trail from Lawrence into Methuen, into Salem, where some jobs are. You can take that. You can take the Amesbury and Salisbury and Newburyport are creating a fantastic network. This is an example. So in the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission is also the staff for the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is essentially a board made up of member communities who decide how to spend our allotment of federal transportation funds. So we have been, as an MPO, very supportive of our member communities wanting to create a region-wide system of trails, a great network of trails. And these are the ones that are either construction or are on the Transportation Improvement Program, which is our 5-year budget for being built. So this is our sort of our construction plan, as it were. These are programmed and ready to go. So these are all in design. The ones that are not in construction are in design, and they will be built in the next 5 or so years. It's very exciting. I put up a blown up portion of the Coastal Trails Network's map so you can see on a local level and a sub-region just the amount of planning that has gone into what their vision was, you know, back in starting in 2000, and what they created and what they've been building every year and what they're trying to accomplish to allow you to get around, so that it's easy and convenient and safe for you to get around. So it's easy for you to make that choice. So the next layer on top of the multi-use trails that we've been supporting is Complete Streets. I'm sure you all are familiar with Complete Streets because it's been in the news here in Newburyport. Newburyport now has a Complete Streets policy and has been working and has recently had their public meetings about their prioritization plan. And essentially, Complete Streets is how to make those everyday trips easy. So you've got these trails, but they don't go everywhere. And even if you wanted to take the trail, how would you get there? So if you wanted your kid to ride to school or walk to school, are there sidewalks? Complete Streets is about looking at the whole road and all the modes that need to use it. So in your industrial park, that would include trucks, as well as bikes, as well as people walking, people who want to take the bus. It includes everybody, you know, emergency vehicles and everything. But it's comprehensive, so we don't leave anybody out like we did for a long time. I love this map because this is the proposed prioritization plan for Newburyport, and it just shows you a vision and the steps they want to take to make it happen. And this was the prioritization plan for Complete Streets, and it's exciting. You know, they're improvements. They're not huge improvements. They're small improvements that can make a big difference in people's everyday lives. So I just provided a few examples of streetscapes that you can see, because I know sometimes there are lots of discussions, especially in historic areas, of how you'd fit them in. And, you know, I guess when I was thinking about it, you know, and I was looking for examples in Old Town Alexandria and other places, I ran out of little time trying to do that, but, you know, bikes were there before the cars, so there's no reason why we can't include them, and it's just a matter of being creative to include them. And we don't have a lot of bike lanes in the Merrimack Valley, period. Newburyport had, I think, the first bike lane, and that was controversial for a little while. But it has stayed, and we're seeing more of them. And now, you know, MassDOT includes in every single project that they do, there has to be accommodation for both pedestrians and cyclists, unless they really can't be there because it's dangerous. We're looking at it systematically through every project that we look at. And a new way of looking is modified from this. In the town of Georgetown, they were doing a regular road project, and you know, a few years ago, a couple years ago, MassDOT would have just said, put the bikes on the road, stripe a lane, we're good to go. But they decided, no, what they would do is widen their sidewalk to be 2 to 3 times the regular size and make a side path out of the sidewalk. So because the street was very busy, and no, people didn't want their kids on the street. And a lot of people aren't comfortable being on the street. So if you create a side path, it makes it easy for everyone, regardless of their comfort level, to actually ride their bike or walk and get from one place to another. And it's an important connection in the trail system, but it's using part of the roadway to do it and accomplish it, because we have far more of those rights of way than we have trail rights of way also. So it's looking at it that way and being efficient in our use of our resources. This is an example of, if you created a shared lane with a bus and how to allow buses to run efficiently. They sometimes get stuck in traffic. I always think about this on Beach Road going out to Salisbury. What if we had a bus lane? Wouldn't that be cool? So then maybe everyone would park like out at the park and ride and take the bus into the beach, and we wouldn't have quite as much, either we wouldn't have quite as much traffic, or maybe we'd have more people going to the beach and spending their money, in downtown Salisbury. Wouldn't that be nice for that town, right? And those businesses. So looking at commuter rail and transit. So what I wanted to say about commuter rail is that we just heard a nice talk from MassDOT, and they're being visionary about it, and they're looking at how to make commuter rail a better option for people. And it's exciting because they want to make the commuter rail run about every 15 minutes. And, during peak periods and maybe 30 minutes in off periods. But that would make it more useful. In Newburyport, we have 17 trains going in one direction. On the Haverhill line, we only have 15 trains running. In the reverse commute, you can't even use our train system for a reverse commute if you wanted to come from Boston to the Merrimack Valley, and businesses say this to us all the time. We'd like to attract some people who live in Boston. They don't have cars, and we can't get them to come out here, and the train doesn't even come out. So how do we do that? It's, it's an economic development problem for us, and, people are obviously saying with their choices, we don't want to drive, some of them. Those of us who live out here have cars. And then transit. So we have a bus that goes around the 54 here in the Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury area. What we're looking at for transit is how to make it more efficient. What tweaks do we need to make to that system to make it work better? It is a long bus ride right now. I think there's a desire to maybe experiment with it a little bit, change it up a little bit. To make transit work, it needs to be efficient and effective. We're looking at, to meet our goals, Massachusetts, I think the goal is to have every bus and car sold in Massachusetts to be electric in 40 years, or by 2040. So that's not too far down the road. And that means that we're also looking at all of our buses to be pushing toward electric. Now, the technology is not quite there yet that we can completely rely on it, but MassDOT is looking at that for us to see what would it take economically, how much funding would we need, and what's the infrastructure to be able to support something like that. So this is where we're looking in, when we talked in the beginning of the presentation about wanting to reduce our climate change impact and how to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, the state is taking it seriously, and we're looking at it with our regional transportation plan, and how do we make that happen financially and effectively. We're also looking at some other things. So we have, just about to be approved, we have our public hearing on April 17th. On the Transportation Improvement Program, we have included bike racks for all the buses so that not this summer, but next summer, all the buses, the MVRTA buses, will be equipped with bike racks on the outside of the buses. So that's exciting, and more bike racks at the transit centers around the region. We're also looking, we've also been promoting bus on shoulder along the highway, along I-93, where there's lots of congestion, so that it's faster, so there's even more incentive to take the commuter buses. As we know, commuter buses are pretty popular from up here.
So that's in the breakdown?
It would be. So the breakdown lane wouldn't be for cars anymore, it would be for buses. We have quite a few commuter buses coming from New Hampshire and in the Merrimack Valley. We have quite a few park and ride facilities. And we could have even more, because the buses, well, the commuter rail goes to North Station, the buses go to South Station, they could go to Cambridge, they could go to more places, and one-seat rides for people once you get to the bus stop to be able to take that in. So it's another option. Again, it's making it convenient for people and economical for them, and easy, just making the mode shift easy. That's all I have. Anybody have questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious as to, is there any way that we can help support doing something like having those buses travel into the breakdown lane into the city, so that people are more wanting to ride them?
I think that it's a great question. Thank you. And I think what you have to do is, the easiest thing is probably to voice that to your legislators as well as your elected officials. I think you can also make that case and be part of the transportation planning process, so you can get on our mailing list, or you can get on the Boston regional mailing list, or I can send out alerts when, so for example, I just asked them, I said, in the Merrimack Valley, bus on shoulder is really important to us, but it's in the Boston region where they'd have to put it, because that's where all the congestion is. So they said, well, it's probably not a priority right now, but if you come and support it, maybe that will help. It's hard because it is financially constrained, and so they're looking at what their priorities are. So, but being loud and talking about how to make that mode shift, I think, is always helpful. So that would be my advice. Talk to your legislator, talk to your elected official, and you can talk to me afterward if you want to get on our mailing list. So.
Last year they tried a bus to the beach in Newburyport.
Yeah.
How did that go?
So, you mean a specific bus just from Newburyport?
It was an MVRT bus, and it went down Federal Street, picked up people, and I don't know where else it started.
I can speak to
summer
that.
Bus.
Oh, good.
I was often the only person on that bus when they ran that. And the idea was to run it from the train station to Newburyport Beach,
right,
on a regular basis. But the problem is, first of all, there was no capacity for, if people are going to the beach, they're going to have beach chairs, and they're going to want water to drink. And there needed to be some facilities established where they could either rent those things when they got to the beach, or had a way to carry them easily on the bus. And again, carry them on the train, carry them on the bus. That starts to feel awkward.
right.
So even your idea about having the bus on, to Salisbury Beach, it's like, that's great, but you have to make sure you accommodate the stuff that they want to bring with them.
It's true. And it's hard. You're right, because it's not like there's a luggage compartment at the top for you. I ride the bus. Every 3 years I have to ride lots of buses, because we write down where people get on and get off, and we do some data collection. And it's funny, because I have seen people buy refrigerators, like the little ones at Walmart, and get on the bus and keep it on the bus with them. So people do use the buses in funny ways like that, and I would never have thought a piece of cargo like that. But I think it's a good question, and something I can bring back to the MVRTA also, about how do we better accommodate that. So do we need to have a space that's for, beach chairs?
Do you survey people when you start up an experiment like that to find out what their needs are?
The MVRT, I think, does some surveying. I don't know if they did for that particular one. I know when they first instituted the 54, we had them count where people were getting on and getting off. And they may have done actual surveys of some of the riders. And that bus was created specifically looking at people who had taken the on-demand service and making sure that we went to all the destinations that those people really need to go, because they were the first group of people who we knew we needed to serve. I think that for a beach service, it would certainly be helpful to hear more from people, not only you, but clearly there's a lot of people who aren't taking the bus. So reaching those people who might be interested in taking the bus, where can you reach them, and getting feedback from them and having them try it is also, it's challenging. It's easier to survey people who are already using your service. It's harder to survey people who are not using your service because they're not on your bus. But I think it's well worth the idea.
Well, the other challenge I would point out is that when they did the survey about the 54 bus,
Yep.
I know I was one of the people who said I would take a bus round trip at least 3 times a week to get to Planet Fitness, because I don't have a car. I moved here from New York. I don't have a car. I walk everywhere. But that would be really helpful to me. But they chose to reroute it
They went
away
a
from
different
my
direction.
house because somebody complained about the noise on the side street.
Oh.
And so, you know, it's a question of what are the priorities? How do you make those decisions?
Right.
What's more important, the ridership or, you know, the squeaky wheel that, you know, is complaining about it?
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
I've only taken the regional buses probably 5 or 6 times in the 40 years I've lived here. And each time there's only been 5 or 6 people on this humongous bus. Is that unusual, or are you driving a lot of big empty buses around?
So it's a question that the MVRTA gets often. And the answer is that different routes get different numbers of people at different times. So some routes are packed and some routes are not. The thing is that they buy buses for the whole system. So if they started just having small buses for one area, then you start getting into regulations that deal with equity in your system. And why are you buying special buses for one city and different buses for another part of the city? Plus, it makes it harder to manage if there are issues with your buses because they rotate them. They don't stay, the same bus does not stay on the same line every day all year long, because they rotate in and out because they're always getting maintenance, and so they move them around the region because some are on really long routes and some are on much shorter routes, so that they look at the mileage, they look at a lot of different things. So it's a challenging question, and I think that they have been getting shorter buses. When they went to more frequent service in Lawrence, I think they started getting a few shorter buses from the really long ones. So they started getting a little bit smaller because then it was spread out, where they were like jam-packed like sardines on a bus. More frequent service means that not everybody has to get on at that 1 hour mark. They're coming every half an hour to 15 minutes, so which helps.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy.
You're welcome. Thank you for all your interest.
Thanks for being